Your Honor, on the 130 calendar, page 2, in custody, DeAngelo.
Is Joseph James DeAngelo your true and correct legal name? I'm sorry? Yes.
This otherwise unassuming elderly man is Joseph James DeAngelo, who in 2018 was arrested as the #1 suspect in the case of the Golden State Killer. From the late 70s to the early 80s and beyond, he terrorized California under 3 different names, including robbery, rapist, and serial killer. In 2018, after years of not knowing who he was finally arrested, and in August of this year, sentenced to consecutive life sentences for many of his crimes, and will never get out as he is not allowed parole. So what was the historical case behind the Golden State Killer? That's what we're going to talk about today in a Keto and Crime Classic, as I take the original 2-parter I did with a good friend of mine who is also in California and who is also married to a prosecutor, so we had kind of a bird's eye view of it. We will delve into it in a extended version of that video. The 2 original parts will still be playable for you on a Golden State Killer playlist that I will place in the channel. But let's dive in to the Golden State Killer.
Keto and crime, keto and crime. We uncover the grime on keto and crime. Keto and crime, keto and crime. Now is the time for keto and crime.
Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome to Keto and Crime. Today we've got the beginning of a new series of episodes I'm going to be doing where I bring in friends that have studied cases, comedians, actor friend of mine that have studied cases. Even a retired police officer will be joining us for one. And they've studied these cases, and they're going to give us their spin on it, so you're not just listening to my opinions. So all these episodes are going to be a little bit longer or split into 2 parts. They're going to be longer podcasts or split into 2 parts for YouTube or BitChute. But basically, it's going to be a normal episode where I relay the facts of the case to you, and then the second part will be an analysis by my friends and I as we discuss the case, and hopefully throw some humor into it because some of these cases are a little bit of a downer. So hope you're going to enjoy that. And if I haven't told you already, it is the holiday season, so if you're watching this within a few days of release, happy holidays. If it's in the future and it's not near the holidays, just ignore that part. But let's get into it. Today's case, the Golden State Killer. This is an interesting one. This is something I've studied and followed for a very long time, and I hope you find it as interesting as I do. In part 2, my good friend 𝗚𝗏 from Los Angeles will be joining me. He is an actor that has been in several movies. I'll let him give off his resume, his IMDb, so to speak. But he's spent a lot of time studying this case, too, and he has some interesting thoughts on it. So let's get into it. Golden State Killer. The Golden State Killer was a criminal that rampaged the entire state of California for about 12 years that we know of, documented years. It could have been going on longer or even before 1974. But he terrorized them in what we call 3 different eras. First is the 𝗬𝗁𝗍 ransacker, which was a cat burglar that vandalized over 100 homes in the 𝗬𝗁𝗍, California area. It's near the Central Valley, getting into Northern California, by robbing over 100 homes. And he would do it very blatantly, because it started out just a normal cat burglar situation, but then the criminal got bolder. And instead of just sneaking in and stealing your stuff when you're not there or when you're asleep, trying not to wake you up, he would literally do it, wake you up, and make you watch as he like ransacked and stole from you. So a very either stupid or sociopathic type of criminal that is willing to take those kind of risks. But I guess he got some kind of psychological thrill off of it, but he always liked people to know he was in their home toward the end of his era as a burglar and the 𝗬𝗪𝗈 ransacker. Because not only would he steal your stuff, he would absolutely demolish the inside of your house. The second era was in the Stockton, Sacramento, Modesto area, which is a little bit further up in Northern California, as the 𝗄𝗄, or the East Area Rapist. Over the span of about 6 years, this criminal raped 50 women that we know of, documented. And these women range in ages from 13 up to 40. I mean, a rape is one of the most horrible crimes I think that anyone can perpetrate on somebody. And to have a person commit that many in the style that he did is mind-boggling, because like his time as the 𝗬𝗪𝗈 ransacker, he got bold about being a rapist. He would not just target women that were there alone. He moved up to women that were there with their children. He would often tie the children up and make them watch as he raped their mother. And then he got to the point he would specifically go there when their husbands were home, and he would restrain the husband and actually make the husband listen or watch while he violated his wife. He had a very interesting way of restraining husbands. He would literally put them in another room, tie them up, put them on their stomach, and stack plates, books, something that would cause a clatter if it moved, on top of their back, and told them if he heard the plates or the books fall, he would automatically kill the woman. No questions asked. And then come and kill them and kill any kids that were in the house. So he terrorized Northern California for many years doing this. And I apologize, I should have put a disclaimer on this video, but we're going to discuss some pretty graphic things, so just bear with us. And then finally, he moved to the Southern California area near Valencia, LA, Santa Cruz, not Santa Cruz, I'm so sorry, Santa Carla, Santa Barbara, that area in Northern and Southern California, where he was known as the original Night Stalker, and he was both a rapist and a murderer, murdering about 13 people in the area. And it was in 2001 that finally DNA evidence linked the East Area Rapist to the original Night Stalker together, and that it was after the arrest of a suspect that they put 2 and 2 together and also realized he was also the 𝗬𝗪𝗈 ransacker. So 3 different stages of evolution: cat burglar to rapist to murderer and rapist. And this went on, like I said, over a span about 12 years, but it took up until 2017, 2018 for an arrest to actually be made. The term Golden State Killer was not coined until 2013. He was still known under 3 different names, sometimes more: the 𝗬𝗪𝗈 ransacker, East Area Rapist, and the original Night Stalker in Southern California. It wasn't until crime writer Michelle McNamara, on video pictured here with her husband, comedian Patton Oswalt, actually took an interest in the case and coined the term Golden State Killer, because she had a suspicion that he was responsible for more crimes. And as I said, in 2001, DNA evidence finally linked the original Night Stalker to the East Area Rapist. So she came up with a better, I think, descriptive for the criminal, the Golden State Killer, because he terrorized all of California. He got Southern California, Central Valley, and Northern California. So no area of California was untouched by this person. So she coined that. Michelle McNamara was a longtime crime writer. She wrote crime novelization. She also hosted the podcast True Crime Diary. And in her own words, she became obsessed with this case. She read and she followed everything. She interviewed police officers from all the police departments that actually worked on it, trying to put together her own profile of the criminal. I apologize. My mother-in-law's cat, her Russian Blue, was walking through the house carrying her 2 dead toy dinosaurs, screaming for my mother-in-law, who's just left to go to her job. My mother-in-law's an RN and a cancer researcher. I think I've had her on videos before. But she had gone to work, and this cat was literally walking over the house crying for her. It's kind of sad, but anyway, I apologize for the ring in the background. So she literally became obsessed with this case. She read it. She interviewed tons of people that had worked on the case. She put together her own profile of the criminal and began working on a book called I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which is the complete case of the Golden State Killer. She worked on it with a couple of different people. Paul Haynes, also pictured here next to her in Patton Oswalt's picture for those on video, was one of her chief researchers on the book. He helped Patton Oswalt finish the book after her death, which we're about to discuss. And she also worked with this other gentleman pictured here, Paul Holt, who was a Contra Costa sheriff's deputy who took an interest in the case and was actually the one that, using what he had discussed and outlined with both Haynes and McNamara, used to kind of pinpoint and find the suspect that was arrested. As I said, Michelle McNamara passed away before the publication of her book. She had it about 2/3 written when she passed away unexpectedly at the age of 47, April 21st, 2016. Evidently, she had a undiagnosed heart issue, had medicated herself with Xanax the night before, and as well as drunk some wine. Never a good idea to mix alcohol and drugs, people. But she passed away in her sleep. And it is said to be from the reaction of the alcohol and the Xanax with an undiagnosed heart problem. Patton Oswalt, of course, was devastated. After a period of grieving, he did what a good husband would do, or a good spouse would do. He, together with her co-writer, finished her book and published it posthumously for her in 2018. And if you haven't read I'll Be Gone in the Dark, it is a great read. You can also find it on Audible, which is how I listen to it, with it being narrated to you. And you can also find hardback Kindle editions. It's a great read. If you're interested in this case, it is the signature book on the Golden State Killer. It's also going to be made into a mini-series from HBO and exploring the case, because she was obsessed, and she told her husband that she, in her lifetime, wanted to see the Golden State Killer arrested and punished for the havoc and horrible crimes he had committed. And she was dedicated to finding his ass. So Patton Oswalt was happy to publish her book posthumously. All right, so Paul Holt took it to another level after the publication of this book. He started wondering, what with DNA evidence linking, they had the DNA evidence from 2001 that linked the East Area Rapist with the original Night Stalker. They had that evidence. So he wondered if there wasn't some sort of database out there where you could compare the DNA that the police had taken in 2001 with a database of existing DNA to possibly get a family tree for the Golden State Killer. And he started studying the genealogy websites such as 23andMe, those types where you can send, a swab and they'll tell you where your ancestry comes from and help you construct a family tree. He went that route, and he finally got a couple of those companies to say they would work with him if he could find his own geneticists, his own DNA scientists to actually do the comparisons, if they would supply him with a bunch of samples. Because they too, the two that who shall remain nameless, the two that he worked with, said they would like to find this Golden State Killer and see him brought to justice. So he started a nationwide hunt for somebody willing to do the analysis, and he found scientist Barbara Ray Ventnor, who was a longtime DNA expert and biologist that was willing, hematologist, who was willing, forensic scientist, willing to do the comparisons between this battery of samples that these genealogy companies were willing to let him work with, to compare to the DNA that was found in 2001 that linked the East Area Rapist with the original Night Stalker. So she agreed to do the work, and she started doing it. It took her a couple of years to put everything together, but she eventually found a match that pretty much led her to believe it was probably a second or third cousin.
And most certainly, I want to emphasize it was a team effort. You know, I initiated the process that led to identifying him, but I could not have accomplished it without other individuals actually contributing greatly to the process.
Were you the one who said DNA is probably going to bring us the person?
I had another case which exposed me to the technology that we used, and educated myself on how that could possibly be applied to the Golden State Killer case. And then in essence, I needed a DNA source, so I went on what I call a roadshow, where I went to the agencies that had DNA samples from the Golden State Killer, trying to sell this possible strategy. And fortunately, Ventura DA's office said, we will let you use our DNA. And that agency stepping up to the plate and doing that allowed us to get to the point where we are today in identifying DeAngelo.
I'm a little confused. So were you the one who suggested we look on Jed?
GEDmatch.
Was that you?
GEDmatch.com. That was me. And I was the one that uploaded the Golden State Killer's profile to GEDmatch.com.
Ventura was the only one that gave you a DNA?
They were the ones that were willing to do that. So, you know, there's only a few samples in the series in which there was enough, and Ventura fortunately had enough for us to be able to use.
And when did you upload his DNA into GEDmatch?
That was January of this year.
So it takes a while, right? I mean,
well, we got results within a day, but it's doing the genealogy side that is very laborious and time-consuming.
because it only brings you a pull. It doesn't go right to him.
That's exactly it. It brings us a pool of people, and it turns out the closest people related to him that we found were on the order of third cousin
To the committer of these crimes in that database. Now, this all rested on the fact that either the Golden State Killer himself or somebody in his family had sent their DNA into one of these genealogy sites. So it was still a long shot, but she found what she thought was a match along the area of it being a cousin. And with that, Paul Hull worked with police to help find this person. During his work as a deputy sheriff near where this gentleman, pictured here, for those of you on video, Joseph James DeAngelo lived, he had been called to Mr. DeAngelo's house several times for different incidents, mainly because he was very verbally abusive to his neighbors. He actually called one of his neighbors at one time, threatening to kill them because their dog was barking. He was seen by neighbors out in the front yard many times, talking to himself, saying, I will kill you, just weird behavior. And as a result, they really, he had a suspicion that this gentleman may be who they were looking for, and he had to get a sample of the DNA from this gentleman for them to actually compare. So he kind of, he went and questioned him about some incidents. He kind of stalked around his house and waited to get some evidence with the gentleman's DNA. And he finally found it in the form of a Coke can and some Kleenex in his garbage. And I know there's a whole thing about privacy there, but that's what happened. He got the DNA, he took it, it was compared, and it came up as a match for being in the same family line as the DNA that had been notified might be a cousin of the Golden State Killer. And as a result, James Joseph DeAngelo became their #1 suspect. Joseph James DeAngelo was born in Bath, New York, November 8th, 1945. He was born to Joseph James DeAngelo Sr. and Kathleen Bassano, who, not much information on his father, but his mother was a waitress. It is said that he witnessed his younger sister's rape when she was 7 years old in a warehouse by two gentlemen, and that scarred him for life. I can only imagine. And from the time that that happened up to present day, he had started to show strange behavior, such as talking to himself, kind of having a misogynistic and unhealthy attitude towards women. So it kind of changed him, and not for the good, as you can imagine. Eventually, the family moved to California, where he attended Folsom High School in the Sacramento area. He did attend college. He joined the Navy right after high school, spent some time in the Navy, honorable discharge, came back to Northern California, attended the Sierra College, graduated with a poli-sci degree, an associate's degree in poli-sci with honors. It was at this time he met another student, Bonnie Jean Caldwell. The two became engaged, but Bonnie called off the engagement shortly thereafter because of verbal and physical abuse. After leaving, after the engagement broke off, he did attend Sacramento State University and College of the Sequoias, where he got both a degree in criminal justice as well as credits towards the police academy. And in 1976, he became a police officer in Exeter and Auburn, California. Very close together in the number of years he served. It was during this time that he was a police officer, 1976 to about 1979, that nearby Visalia, California, started experiencing a rash of cat burglaries. This is when the Visalia ransacker was in his heyday. So you had this gentleman, a Navy veteran, and a police officer living in the area when all these robberies and burglaries were taking place. He was actually caught in 1979, about the time that those burglaries kind of subsided. He was caught shoplifting some very strange things from a hardware store, namely rope or cord, the same kind that was had been used to secure some of the victims of the ransacker. He was also just some strange things that should have been indicative to any police officer that there's more going on here. But because he was a police officer, he was fired in 1979, and the burglaries stopped because they moved from the area about that time. He had met an expiring lawyer, Sharon Marie Huddle, in 1973. They got married, had 3 daughters. Along the years, they did leave. After he was fired from being a police officer, they left the Northern California area, moved closer to Southern California in the Citrus Heights area in 1980, and the burglary stopped, ironically. It was around this time they suspect he graduated to being the East Area rapist, starting to rape women, around 50 women in the Sacramento and Northern California, Stockton, Modesto area of California, while he was a police officer, while he was still in the area. He graduated to rape. And as I said before, he was he was a sociopath. He wanted to make sure that their families were also humiliated. He would tie the husbands up, put plates and books on their back, tell them that if he heard them, he would automatically kill the mom. He raped one woman while her young daughter was sleeping in the bed next to her. Many of the witnesses would say later that the liberties he took were unbelievable, that he would, after the deed was done, he would stay in the house, he would drink beer that was in the fridge, he would go out on the patio, pop a beer, sit down. He wore a mask the entire time, so nobody really knew who he was. He would have a beer, have some dinner, linger in the house, rummage through things, ransack the house, much like his heyday as being a cat burglar, and would disappear. Many of his rape victims said during the act, they would hear him whisper strange things like, "I hate you, Bonnie. I hate you," alluding back to his broken off engagement. So there's a lot of evidence outside of the old DNA evidence that's stacking up against Mr. DeAngelo. There were another young lady whose mom had been raped, said that after it was over, her mom thought he was gone, and she actually asked her daughter, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I was only 9, but I remember distinctly saying, 'Mommy, he's still here. Be quiet.'" And sure enough, as soon as she said that, a masked figure came forward out of the darkness, pressed down on the bed, letting them both know he was still there, and then walked out. He would also call his victims after it was over and say cryptic things like, "Remember when we played?" He was definitely a maniac, a psychopath and a sociopath to no level. Along all this time, his wife did graduate from law school in 1982. His job history from the 80s was pretty non-existent. He either was unemployed or doing under-the-table odd jobs. We don't have a record of any employment from him until later on in 1990, right about the time his wife divorced him in 1991. He actually took a job as a diesel truck mechanic with Save Mart supermarkets, and everybody... His job said he was a model employee, he was always on time, he was friendly, even though he did still have a habit of talking to himself and just overall being weird. After the divorce, he left Citrus Heights and moved closer to LA, moving in with his youngest daughter and her child. So he was living with his daughter and his granddaughter at the time of his arrest. But it was here that he started exhibiting more strange behavior, and here that Detective Hull kind of started investigating some of the many domestic and neighbors disputes that went on, and eventually got the DNA evidence that linked him to being the East Area rapist and the original Night Stalker. Mr. DeAngelo was known as never really driving a car. He rode a bike everywhere. In fact, during most of the crimes that he is accused of, a car tracks was never found. Neither were footprints, only bike tracks. So he was using bicycles to get to and from his crimes as well. And usually stolen bicycles, so they could never be tracked back to him. So he was, by all accounts, very physically fit. He was in his 70s at the time of his arrest, but most of his neighbors said he appeared to be in the same physical health as a 50-year-old. I mean, very, very good health for his age. He was living, as I said, with his daughter and granddaughter at the time of his arrest. He was arrested on April 24th, 2018 by the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office. And the Santa Barbara County District Attorney's Office charged DeAngelo with 8 and then an additional 4 counts of first-degree murder and rape, May 10th, 2018. And we are still waiting for the results of that trial. He is all of a sudden disabled, even though, by all accounts, he was in good physical shape.
All right, Your Honor, on the 130 calendar, page 2, in custody, DeAngelo.
Is Joseph James DeAngelo your true and correct legal name? I'm sorry? Yes.
He rode a bike. He had both a recumbent stationary bike in the house that he lived. He also rode a regular bike outside. He did yard work in very good shape. Now all of a sudden, coming to his trial, he's in a wheelchair, stares straight ahead, dead blank look, doesn't appear to be mentally there. So many people believe this is an act he's putting on not to be convicted in his old age. His ex-wife has put out a kind of a statement saying that her and her children know nothing about his crimes. Please respect their privacy and leave them alone. So that's kind of where we stand with the Golden State Killer. Linked by DNA evidence, strange behavior, MO, riding a bike, voice scans of the phone calls and stuff he received, that former victims received, also linked back to him. So we have a good case against this guy. Is he really the Golden State Killer? I'm going to lean toward yes. Of course, that could be just hopeful thinking that it's finally over. But that's where we stand with the case of the Golden State Killer. And that's where I'm going to end part one. Welcome everybody to part 2 of the Golden State Killer here on Thought Crime, Keto and Crime, and the Keto Comic. Today I'm joined by my good friend Mr. 𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗏 as we discuss the case, as well as poke a little fun, have a little fun, discuss a little Shonda Rhimes television, and lots of other things I think you'll enjoy. So let's get into it. Part 2, Golden State Killer. Okay, we are recording. Well, welcome, Ian. Thank you so much for being on Thought Crime and Keto and Crime today. Tell my viewers a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Ian Jesse Lasky. I'm the great-grandson of Jesse Lasky, who founded Paramount Studios. And I've been an actor my whole life, so ever since I was 4. So I, when I became an adult, I, kind of left it behind, went to college, became a college professor, and, my wife's a DA, so I've always been interested in crime stories and true crime stories, and I've been following this one for a while now. So I thought maybe I can add something to your cast about the
awesome.
story.
Well,
yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much again for being on. I know it's some time out of your day, and I always appreciate everyone's time. Give everyone maybe a little background about movies that you've maybe been in or roles they could check you out in.
If you check my IMDb, I was in several things that didn't get on there. I was a little kid. I was in Close Encounters of the Third Kind as a stand-in and for the lead, as well as Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. That's not on there. But the most recent thing I did was Hail Caesar.
Nice.
Which cool. Which actually got me my SAG cards. That's helpful.
And for those of you who don't know, SAG cards, like every actress reaches for, because you can get benefits and lots of union jobs that you can't get otherwise. So I haven't reached that level yet. Most of my stuff's ended up on the cutting room floor, so you're way ahead of me. Well, all right, Golden State Killer. Let's get into it. What are your thoughts? I mean, do you think Mr. DeAngelo is guilty, or do you think they've got the wrong guy? What's kind of your take on that?
No, I tend to think that they have the right person, and and the law enforcement doesn't generally waste time on people that are innocent. Although they sometimes make mistakes. In this case, I don't think they did. I think they got the right person. He just fits the time that he was in those areas. Fits the MO of everything that was done previously. And I had to do a little bit of research because I got a little bit confused onto the original Night Stalker versus the Los Angeles Night Stalker. And I realized that those were in two different areas. One was in Santa Barbara and one was in LA. And the reason why he has that is because it came before, not because it had anything to do with each other. But I think he's as guilty as sin.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you. I think, like you said, this case was confusing. It's probably one of the more confusing ones I've ever studied because he had so many. Because he is known to be so many things. And there's probably crimes out there that he'll never be charged with because we don't know. He had such a long career. I mean, we know it to be 12 years, but it could have gone on long before then. I mean, to start as a cat burglar, and then to go straight up to tying people up and ransacking their house and robbing them while they watched. Then he graduated to rape, and a very exhibitionist type of rape, and then into murder. It was just these leaps and bounds he took.
But if you look at crime stories,
It's
and
just the boldness.
if you look at crime stories, you'll see that a lot of people start small, wherever it is, and work their way up. And there seems to be a progression here with the, first, breaking into people's homes and then getting enough courage to tie them up, and then getting enough, once you get enough experience, you level up and then go into murder and and rape, whatever. And then once you level up from that, it's like you started off as a small imp and then became a demon, then became a full-fledged demon, and then the leader of the underworld.
Plus 500 experience points.
So yeah, and so he's the type of person that I would expect. If this was a fantasy movie, you have to get the Sword of Horrors or something to take him down at a later. Nothing else would work.
Exactly. And it's just the type of person it takes to commit some of these crimes. I couldn't. Well, first of all, of course, we're kind of normal sense people. We're not thinking about just to do it in a very brazen way, tying up loved ones and making them listen or watch. I'm not a psychologist, so I don't like to diagnose people with anything, but I would say he's probably the stereotypical either sociopath or psychopath. I always get those a little bit confused, but he's definitely not of a normal mindset, in my opinion.
No, yeah, psychopath is a more general term that people like to throw around. A sociopath is very specifically someone that no matter how hard they try, they can't be empathetic with their fellow humans. They're dead. It's another person is just something else to them. It's not a they can't feel what they feel. It's impossible.
Right.
So so a psychopath is more general. Like you can attach other psychology aspects to it, or someone, but it's more of a general term that is used.
Yeah.
So a psychopath could be a sociopath, but a sociopath doesn't necessarily have to be a psychopath.
That makes sense. Thank you. Like I said, I knew that the two terms get thrown around quite a bit. I wasn't really sure on which was which, but yeah. And I think probably the most interesting thing about this case to me is the fact that it was kind of solved because of nosy people like you and me, crime writers, podcasters, comedians that really wanted to get involved. And I think that's probably the most interesting part of this case, that it was Michelle McNamara, because she became, and it just kind of shows that maybe us on the nosy side can do some good every once in a while.
Well, yeah, and the police can't be everywhere at all times, and they can't. They don't have a lot. Sometimes they don't have a lot of resources to solve everything. So it really, whenever they get help like this, I'm sure they really appreciate it. But this is kind of one of those things that I was thinking it was going to turn into the Zodiac Killer, and no one is going to be able to solve all of this stuff. And for someone to wrap it all together and give it a title and link all of this all across the state is an amazing feat.
Definitely. I mean, it was 2001 when they finally, you had enough DNA and DNA evidence to say that the East Area rapist and the Southern California stalker were the same person,
Yeah.
And that's just amazing. And the fact that they DNA, they were able to, because of an idea that a retired sheriff's deputy had, to actually take that and submit it to databases like these genealogy databases, and actually narrow it down to his family tree, find people in his family. And then from that, they were kind of able to narrow it down to him. I think that's probably one of the most interesting types of experiments I've ever seen on anything. And to me, it's amazing they even allowed it to be admissible. So out there, this,
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part of what
I'm sorry. I think it's really interesting that the police even allowed this to be admissible in a court of law, just because it's so out there. It's so unconventional the way they linked him, to these crimes, first by finding a second or third cousin, and then by basically stalking outside his house until they could get some DNA from him to link it to him. I think that's all. I think that's just a very unusual way they took to.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just what. I mean, that's good old-fashioned detective work. There's nothing unusual there. But to be able to make the leap from third cousin to that was kind of a huge break in the case, I think. But I don't think that they did anything out of the ordinary. That's typically what they do. You know, they interview everybody. They get a timeline. If they fill in the details, they investigate, and investigating means, well, driving around town and stalking people. It's just kind of what they do.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Do you get the idea? Go ahead, please finish. Please.
Oh, no. It was one of those things. You ever had a thought in your head that went away?
All the time. All the time.
I was going to say something, and then you said something, and I forgot what I was going to say.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
You can watch any of my YouTube videos. You'll see, like, I'm on a train of thought, and then that thought leaves, and I'm like, so it happens all the time.
Yeah. So I completely forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, don't get old. It's not a good thing. I advise everybody if they could stop aging at 35. Then they would be better off, because after 35, my mind, I'm already like 49 now, so.
Oh, goodness.
But,
I'm not far behind you. I'm 45, or I'll be 45 in April, so I'm not far behind you. I live in the mind fog sometimes.
I just need more coffee, I guess.
But, I think of one very interesting. I exist on caffeine, and I know it's a couple of hours. He's in California, folks, so he's a couple of hours behind me here in Central Time. But I think one interesting point that I didn't even bring out in part one of this, that I should have, because it was just so hilarious, is that many of the rape victims that he had, they all brought out one very interesting his anatomy had a micropenis, which would which would fit.
What was that?
Yeah,
like,
some of his victims. Yeah, the size of his member. And most
that they are concerned about the size of their manhood.
Meaning concerned as in small?
Worrying that it's too small. Yeah, and we're joined today by three of the country's bravest men, actually, because there aren't many that would come and sit on the sofa. I know you're all a bit nervous.
He had like over half of his victims say that that's one thing that they just stood out because it was tiny, which leads me to believe he was probably compensating for some stuff. But so one of the early suspect was to profile men that had micropenises, and they used that exact word, micropenis. That was probably the most unusual term I've ever heard in my life. But they actually did have like penis measurement lineups in the early days of this investigation to try to narrow this down to someone.
Now that I have no idea what the legal definition.
I know, but they did. That was like,
it's like okay.
I mean, I didn't use that in my initial presentation, but I can only imagine they probably did. I mean, we're talking like 1970s, so they weren't very PC at that time. So I can imagine there probably was lineups.
Can you imagine that being on like Blue Bloods or something, and like you have men walking in, butt naked from the waist down, and they show it. Okay, which one is the perpetrator?
He's average. And what determines a micropenis? I'm just thinking I think of a big pen somehow, and I know that's probably not the correct term, but it's like it's just mind blowing. Evidently, he had a really small thingy, and that was just a determining factor. And they've also said that about Mr. DeAngelo, so evidently they've got their man all the way around. So.
It's like, okay,
Don't
so
make this shit up. It was literally there in the in the literature.
I can't. I just can't even. I totally missed that. You took me completely by surprise because I didn't even see. When you read, you don't get this on CNN. You don't get this on
You don't.
anywhere else.
It takes an independent journalist or an independent podcaster to really bring out the most unusual aspects of these cases, because mainstream that or they. But I thought that was very funny, and the fact that I think he had such bad luck with women, especially since he had the engagement broken off early, and some of his victims actually said while doing what he did to them, he would say, "I hate you, Bonnie, I hate you," which was the name of his former fiance. And then the fact he and his wife ended up divorcing, who his wife ended up becoming a lawyer.
Yeah, I read that.
So, yeah, I think maybe he just felt, I don't want to say woman hater, but I'm going to kind of lean toward that. Either felt very intimidated by women, or maybe the early version of an incel, for lack of a better term. Just very anti-woman.
I mean, possible. I mean, if he is indeed a true sociopath, he doesn't have any empathy for anyone, male, female, adult, kid, and so he can't feel anything for them. But if he's not, which the thing is that when you use the term "I hate you, Bonnie, I hate you," that leads me to believe that he's not a sociopath. That he has a lot of emotion and a lot of anxiety and hatred against women. So by definition, that's not sociopathic.
Very true. Very true.
But yeah, I mean, it's either, if you can go with the sociopathic theory, then he's unable to feel things for anyone, which would explain everything. And then if you go with the woman hater, I've had a horrible life, and my wife left me, my dog left me, my cat left me. I hate people, I hate society. Then you're in the realm of cold-blooded, incel person that's been put down upon in society, and you really can't have both. It's either one or the other. Whether it is, I don't know which one it is myself. I would actually, I would say that either way, there's just no there's no defense against something like this.
No.
And the second way makes it more. It makes my skin crawl more than the first way. Does the sociopath doesn't make my skin crawl as much as the person that hates a whole group of people just because of their experiences. But I can't get into that mindset myself personally, which is probably why I'd never do something like this myself. But it's just it's so it's just so fascinating that this case should have been like one of those several cold cases that you hear about in maybe 7 different episodes or whatever it is. And then they were able to tie it all together. It's just insane. But at least they got someone, and they got a horrible person off the street. So there's that. They
did. Well, I think the fact that it was better than 30 years after the fact that they got him, and a lot of people might say, well, that's just a wasted conviction. He's 74 years old. Why arrest him now? He's practically on death's door. But I think it's a good thing. Number one, he needs to be punished for what he did. And two, I think it's an example that are thinking they're going to get away with it or have gotten away with it, that it doesn't necessarily work like that. That eventually, the good guys will win. At least that's what I like to say. That I think only the Zodiac killer maybe is the only one that ever actually maybe got away with it. As far as maybe Jack the Ripper. I mean, there's a few examples out there of people that got away with it, but I think in this case, it's a good thing because maybe it shows that the people that do get away with it are very much in the mind.
Well, my wife would always say
maybe
that,
don't try it.
Yeah, my wife would always say that they don't catch the smart ones. You know?
Yeah.
And one of the good explanations why this took so long is it happened across the entire state.
Yeah.
Hundreds of times. They thought each case was independent.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't before the author that she said in the first one that linked it all together that they were able to even do that. DNA evidence, was non-existent and in its infancy in my whole lifetime from 1974 onwards. So they couldn't link someone physically to a crime until late 80s. So
yeah,
it's before that it was just good old-fashioned police detective work combined with the fact that if a crime happens and more than a couple of days pass, the chances of the police catching them are become lower and lower.
Right.
So I think actually the opposite. I think it's just amazing that he was caught. And if this person is as cold-blooded as he says he is, which I thoroughly believe that, it's better for everybody he's off the street.
Definitely, because you're elderly doesn't mean you still can't hurt someone else. And the way these crimes, there was a few years of crimes and then there was a break and there was a few years of crimes and then another break. Who's to say he just wasn't in that dormant period where suddenly he was going to wake up and go back to doing what he evidently likes to do or is driven to do, so just because because all accounts he was still in top physical shape. I mean, most of his neighbors would characterize him as being the vitality of a 50-year-old, not a 70-year-old. It's only since he was arrested that he's suddenly disabled, so who's to say he wouldn't have gone right back to doing what he was doing? Maybe he was just in his dormant period.
Could have been, this is the thing about, when you add all of this heinous stuff together, there's, they talk about, in cases of like murder, there's no statute of limitations. In cases of rape, there is, horrible statute of limitations. In the case of robbery, you gotta, for the police to even look at it, it has to be at least $900.
Right.
Someone, many years ago broke into my house and the police just looked at it and went, oh, well, no one was injured. And yes, you lost over $1,000 worth of stuff, but it's just not worth our time. It's just those laws need to be changed so that they can investigate that stuff. I'm under the impression.
I had a car stolen right out of my driveway, and they had the same. You have insurance, right? Yeah, I have insurance, but my car was stolen.
Yeah, and you weren't killed, so so that they don't put a lot of resources behind it, just because all of their resources are tapped and they have a limited amount, and there's just so much to investigate.
Right.
So, which I can see, but I think I'm rambling. But my frame of thought for like in cases of rape, there shouldn't be a statute of limitations at all. There should be if you rape someone and you're caught 60 years later, then well, guess what? You're guilty. You should be able to be put away.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, I think the right call was made them to reopen the case, and I think the fact that you had Michelle McNamara, who was a high profile, she had one of the most popular true crime podcasts on the air at that time. Of course, it was in the early days of podcasting, but she was still one of the most popular. And then behind her, you had the playlists, and then you had them kind of, sounding the alarms, keeping it in the public thing, and then you had DNA evidence where they could link it, and then they did link it, and then you had a retired sheriff get involved. I think it was just the perfect storm to revive this case. And I don't think it would have happened if it hadn't have been for the independent journalists and stuff keeping this stuff going, wanting to find this person, because they didn't know if this person was alive or dead or would do it again.
Definitely.
Especially when the Night Stalker and the East Area Rapist is one person.
Yeah. I actually read about those cases independently, and I always thought that they were that they were independent. You know,
Yeah.
I always thought, I never thought that the East Area Rapist could be the same as the original Night Stalker.
Right.
Um,
And then the 𝗬𝗂𝗪 ransacker. I mean, he's not being prosecuted for any of the robbery. The statute of those took place in the 70s. They've long since, that statute of limitations is passed, even though they say they can link him. No, I don't think anyone's really worried about that. But I think the fact that he's going to be tried for the most heinous of his crimes, the murders and some of the rapes, is probably enough. I'm not going to worry about him getting prosecuted for being a cat burglar or not. But it's just interesting that he kind of went from that to murder eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very odd. I'm sorry. I think I'm getting a little bit of a delay, so I don't know if I'm talking.
Yeah. Oh no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I'll edit it out. Don't worry. That's the beauty of editing.
Yeah.
But yeah, but like I said, I'm glad that he's caught. I'm glad. I'll be watching the trial with a whole lot of interest to see what happens to him. This California, or was commuted down to life, wasn't it, in the 60s or 70s?
Didn't catch the last half of your sentence.
Does California doesn't have the death penalty anymore, does it?
Hold on one sec. Sweetie, do we have a death penalty or not? I can't remember. Yes, we have a death penalty.
Okay, so they probably...
There's a moratorium on it thanks to the governor. We've had a death penalty since I was born. We were using it all the way up until the last general election. And the new governor, Newsom, decided to put a moratorium on it. And so there's people still on death row, but they're waiting for the moratorium to, be released. It's not been banned per se, but it's just not done because the governor doesn't like it.
Okay. Okay. Well, we all know how long trial simply death penalty may be off moratorium. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to him. For sure.
Yeah.
If he's not dead.
If he's not dead by then.
Yeah.
But I would say that, the more we can keep, criminals like this off the street, the better off we are as a society. I would like to think that, there's, a part of me that says, okay, we've got to, follow the death penalty, and part of me says that, it's actually better if they're in prison. So maybe they could think about what they did and hopefully be rehabilitated. But in this case, there's just no rehabilitation for something like that. I mean, how do you, if they're a sociopath, you can't rehabilitate them. If they're conniving, maniacal killer, there's no rehabilitating that either. I tend to think it's the second one because of his background. He started off in criminal justice and then a police officer, and then so I mean, he kind of, I think, in his own mind, practiced this whole time. It's like laying in wait for someone and then killing them, except you're doing it to a whole society. So it's kind of diabolical. There's just people out there that are just evil, unfortunately, and there's nothing that anyone can do about it.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you said about your wife saying that only the smartest never get caught. Well, he wasn't the smartest. I mean, in the case of being the 𝗬𝗂𝗪 ransacker, he was lifting that was being used in some of those robberies, like the twine and stuff like that. And I'm always surprised that the police didn't put two and two together, at that time. But maybe they thought, it was in the 70s, maybe they thought that, it couldn't be one of us. He's a stupid thief, but he wouldn't do that. And then, later on, him, stealing bicycles to ride back and forth, and then being so brazen when he was in the house, even after he had raped the wife and had the husband and kids tied up around the house, eat what was in the refrigerator. I mean, I don't know if that's just courage or stupidity. I don't know. What's your take on that?
With all the different mistakes that were made throughout the whole thing, you would think he would be caught sooner than, like something would have happened sooner. I tend to think it was maybe one crime was done in one county, one crime was done in another, so they don't really share information. This is just conjecture, but if a police officer, if he bragged about it to another police officer and the other police officer didn't do anything about it, then he used the thin blue wall thing against itself. But that's just conjecture. I don't know, if that actually happened or not. It's possible that he just didn't tell anyone. He was smart enough not to brag about it. And that it had to be when it was, DNA evidence along with a timeline. That's the only thing that got him caught. It wasn't all of these, witnesses that came up or anything. So it's very. It's more of like if you're going to, let's say, attack a computer by having someone by social engineering kind of thing. It seems like more of a social engineering is what I'm getting at than it is a mindset than it is a any other mindset. I think personally, I think he was smart enough not to talk to everybody, about it. And he didn't really. It's not something he said that he would tell anybody about because someone would have probably turned him in sooner.
Right. They did say that he would have conversations at his truck mechanic job about the killer, just like everyone else would, because it was hot news, but nothing that would alarm anybody to think he might know more about it. So, he was brazen enough to talk about it, but as a casual fan would, but as a casual follower of that, like we're doing, he would talk about it kind of like we're doing, but really.
Well, how many conversations have you had about? I'm sorry, there's that delay again. My thought is, how many conversations have you had about the Zodiac Killer or any other killer? How many shows have you seen on TV, like Mine Hunters?
Yeah.
I have these conversations every single day with my wife about one case versus another because it's her job. And we talk with it. We just, sometimes, it just ends up in conversation, So, it's possible to talk from one person to the next and someone's coworker about it. It's just, he never said, "Oh, I know about this case because I did it." Ha ha ha. You know? He never did that. So he was smart enough not to. He doesn't follow the a mindset of most killers where they're proud of what they do, or they take and at least if this is true, I didn't see it. He didn't take any type of souvenirs, or he didn't have a playbook or anything written down. So, there's just no other way to link them other than DNA and timelines.
Exactly. I think he was smart.
Good old-fashioned police work versus enhanced with technology that's available. But I think he was smart enough not to discuss it. You can discuss it in a third person and say, which is weird, but the Golden State Killer did this and the Golden State Killer did that, but he never said I did this. Is my point.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. At all, I think he get caught, but I think this is very much a crime in that I don't think he could get away with this today. If there was a new Golden State Killer out there being bred or being, molded, so to speak, I don't think they could get away with this as long as this one did today. What with all the technology we have, I think that you would be able to link somebody to these crimes a lot quicker than this was done. I think it was just sort of a crime of its time, just like the Zodiac Killer was kind of a crime of its time. I think a lot of these people that kind of capture or for so long only did it because of our lack of technology. I think it would take a whole new level of super criminal, if that's a term, to do the same thing today, what with all the technology and methods that we have of catching people, plus just social media. People are always out there with their cameras and stuff. It's quite possible you could catch the next serial killer on video. There's just so much more today. It's much more dangerous today to go about any sort of illegal activity than it was the 70s or 80s. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, Facebook knows you before you know yourself, right? So, like,
Exactly.
we carry 3-4 devices on us, and like, it would be kind of silly for me to say I wasn't somewhere. Well, we have this GPS evidence that says you were. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't. It's harder to lie. Although I guess if I was a horrible person, I could probably hack my device and use a VPN and tell that VPN I was somewhere else, so I can do this horrible thing, or have enough sense not to bring the device. Can you imagine 30 years from now, someone did a killer, killed like a bunch of people, and said, and everyone said, well, how did he not get caught? Everyone has GPS. Well, he was smart enough to leave his phone at home.
Oh, yeah. I can see some super criminal, doing some kind of heinous crime, hopefully not killing somebody, but some kind of heinous crime, have a VPN and broadcast it, but they can't tell where it's coming from because it's a throwaway account.
You better sell that one to Blumhouse. It's
somebody else enough to be able to do that.
That idea will make Blumhouse $10 million, and you just gave it away.
Yeah. That's an idea for script. Maybe you and I should work on that.
I kind of like that idea. That's a nice horror movie right there, waiting to happen. Then you have to have the person that says, there's evil, and in this community of wherever,
Right.
Zuza.
And tell my wife, if there's ever a murder in our little town here in Tennessee, I'm a prime suspect because I'm a crime podcaster, and I'm the first one to scream out at the TV during a crime show, "You idiot, I can show you a better way to get rid of a body." I'm a prime suspect.
Then you have to write one of them how-tos, and this is how to do it. Step 1,
How to get away with murder.
That seems like a TV show. How to get away with murder.
It is. I believe Shonda Rhimes might have done.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of that show, by the way.
All right. Oh, me too. I'm a big fan of. I still watch Grey's Anatomy. I mean, the plot line has gone, but I still love.
First season, though, that first season was.
The first 6 seasons were really good. Then after they killed everybody off,
Yeah, that happens. Everyone dies, and then they have this new cast.
Exactly.
That's why I stopped watching the Walking Dead. I mean, like, everybody is dead. It's like, why bother? But okay, so
I don't even want to get into my rage about The Walking Dead. We'll be here another 3 hours. Well, Ian, it has been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for coming on and taking your time to do this. I really appreciate it, man.
You're a good friend, and I'm willing to help anytime. So you just let me know.
Absolutely. I'll be back to LA soon. Maybe we can get together and have lunch or something.
Yeah, your people can call my people. We'll do lunch.
Well, family, man, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays, Christmas. Bye.
Bye-bye.